Next slide, please. Our second ask is on classrooms and procurement, particularly localizing implementation and closing the gaps. The Department of Education and the Second Congressional Commission on Education, or EdComm2, estimate that as of 2024, our backlog is approximately at 165,000 classrooms, with the highest deficits in NCR, Calabarzon, and Central Luzon. At the current rate of construction, it would take over 50 years to close this gap. And we should, I think, also bear in mind that the gap is ever widening because lumalaki ng lumalaki ang student population every year, leaving a whole generation of learners studying in overcrowded and shifting classrooms. The government's Basic Education Facilities Fund, or the BEF, for 2026 is pegged at 63 billion, up from the 28 billion in the original National Expenditure Program. This additional 35 billion can roughly fund 25,000 classrooms. Yet, as what was shared by our colleague earlier, that's a drop in the bucket as it covers only 15% of the total deficit. But the problem goes beyond funding, and we all know this. Even with the increase in funding, we could see that there are inefficiencies. 2025 DepEd audit, as what I've said earlier, 1,000 built classrooms were incomplete or unusable. It lacks toilets, electrical wiring, or even foundations. Furthermore, DPWH annual or average costs for per classroom ranges from 2.5 million to 3.8, while LGUs and PPP projects for the same classroom building would only cost 1.5 million to 2.1 million. So these disparities underscore that inefficiency and not merely insufficient funds is the real constraint. We therefore strongly urge that the 2026 General Appropriations Act allocate increased funds for classroom construction, rehabilitation, and learning spaces, coupled with, and equally important, is ensuring that these funds are accessible, efficiently utilized, and locally responsive. Our recommendations in this include, where feasible, LGUs and local school boards should be allowed to undertake classroom construction under the national design and safety standards. So localized or decentralized procurement implemented transparently can reduce bottlenecks, improve efficiency, and ensure that infrastructure investment directly benefits learners and communities. Second, the public-private partnership, or the PPP, for classroom pipeline should be accelerated to 105,000 units with standardized contracts, service level penalties, and sustainability clauses. This was actually part of the recommendations by a study done by PIDS last year. Community participation and CSO monitoring should be institutionalized, particularly in the LSBs and DepEd's partnership frameworks to ensure transparency and timely project completion. Standard costs benchmarks and open data dashboard on classroom procurement, construction, completion, and defects must be maintained to prevent overpricing and delays. And lastly, DPWH must be held accountable for the defective classrooms. So a joint DepEd and DPWH remediation plan must be implemented for all unusable classrooms, with payments withheld to contractors until independent engineers certify compliance. So PBED's proposed reform on this aims to make every peso accountable. Local procurement and the PPPs can cut unit costs significantly, freeing funds for teacher development and learning materials. Again, transparency dashboard can make DepEd's infrastructure spending visible and verifiable, and with a major step towards gaining public trust. We cannot just build our way out of the 165,000 classroom backlog if we do not fix how we build. Addressing classroom inefficiency is therefore a governance reform, not just a construction project. Next slide. Our third ask is on voucher expansion. So in 2024, DepEd conducted an internal audit of its voucher program and uncovered major integrity issues, with some schools claiming funds for students who never attended classes or who were already enrolled elsewhere. So the subsequent investigation led to the recovery and refund of around 65 million from 54 private schools for invalid claims, while 7 schools face criminal complaints for falsifying records and ghost beneficiaries. Again, beyond fraud, the voucher program's targeting has somehow drifted. In its current implementation, it is not serving its intended purpose of increasing equity of access. A large share of the vouchers goes to students in areas where public schools have available capacity, while students in geographically isolated or disaster-affected communities often lack access to participating private schools. The lack of a centralized single learner ID system and the real-time validation allows for duplication and delays. Yet despite these gaps, the voucher system as implemented right now remains a critical stopgap. And we all know this. It alleviates congestion immediately, unlike classroom construction where it takes months if not years before being built. So we support the legislative measures to amend the Education Service Contracting or the ESC and the Senior High School Voucher Program, as well as the measure to establish the Bureau of Private Education in DepEd to expand access across basic education levels, promote equity, and strengthen public-private complementarity. However, again, the call for stronger safeguards are needed to ensure vouchers reach those who need them most, and automated prepayment risk checks and transparent reporting of voucher disbursements must be institutionalized to prevent fraud and eliminate ghost students. The PAYAC, the PEAC, continues to play a vital role in the monitoring and capacity building for participating schools. So I think we also need to put in significant money in terms of further expanding and empowering the PEAC. Still, as the coverage grows, the absence of a unified digital integrity framework risks recurring anomalies and erodes public confidence. So our ask on this is that existing resources must be strategically allocated. As already mentioned, we need to expand the voucher coverage in localities where public schools are over in capacity. We need to have a targeting, we target areas and beneficiaries. It should be based on identifiable and reliable data, up-to-date data, actually, that reflects the actual conditions on the ground. Voucher distribution should also be considered in LGUs with classroom deficits, high dropout rates, or disaster-affected schools, and they must be prioritized to ensure efficient and impactful resource use. Integrity safeguards must be implemented, such as requiring a learner reference system or the LRN, which is verified against DepEd's LIS and also the Philippine Identification System or the PhilSys, with automated checks to flag duplicates in the system and to track inputs across databases. If possible, geotag, timestamp, attendance, and risk checks must also be done before releasing the voucher funds to prevent ghost students and fraud. We reiterate our call to empower the PEAC, particularly for capacity for data-driven monitoring and quality assurance. And then lastly, our call for the creation of the Bureau of Private Education should be supported through a legislation or consolidation of oversight, accreditation, and sanctions under a single bureau to streamline management of the private school sector. The key point on our third ask is on voucher program should not be viewed as a substitute for public education, but as strategic instruments that complement public investment by bridging the gaps in the short term while infrastructure and teacher deployment catches up. Next slide. This is our fourth ask, Mr. Chair. We need to strengthen the Teacher Education Council or the TEC to build a stronger teaching force. And we all know this po, quality education is ultimately determined by the quality of our teachers. However, inequities persist in teacher preparation, distribution, and professional development. Because of that law that created the TEC, on January 2026, next year, the TEC will be transitioning into an attached agency. And there's been allocation already to the tune of around 204 million. Under the DBM's NEP, coverage of that, particularly, I will not go to the details, but the current allocation, we would say, severely limits the agency's capacity to fulfill its mandate, especially in the pilot implementation of the Teacher Education Scholarship Program, or the TESP. We were informed, Mr. Chair, na baka wala pong budget for next year for the TESP, which seeks to support future teachers who will serve in high-need areas and critical subject specializations. So DepEd reported last year, or actually this year, that the government continues to open new hiring items, and there remain to be around 38,000 plus unfilled teaching positions. Further, EdComm2 found out that in school year 2023 and 2024, 62% of secondary school teachers are teaching outside their specialization. Therefore, our call to increase for this particular ask is to increase the funding for the Teacher Education Council in 2026 next year, so that the agency will be able to, number one, administer the Teacher Education Scholarship Program, or the TESP, which is part of the law. The TESP will address shortages of teachers in specific subject expertise and in localities. The TESP will also attract and support the best and the brightest, the deserving basic education graduates from public and private schools and tertiary level students to pursue undergraduate teacher education degree programs. We have identified a specific amount, Mr. Chair, 103 million, needed to fund a pilot of 720 teacher scholars under TESP. This scholarship can target severely unrepresented programs kung nasaan po yung mga gaps natin sa teachers, particularly for Bachelor of Early Childhood Education, Special Needs Education, and also in secondary education major in values education. There's also the need to support the capacity building of the teacher education institutions, or the TEIs, especially the Centers of Excellence, or the COEs, and the Centers of Development, or the CODs, to improve the quality, relevance, and equity of access of teacher education programs nationwide. And lastly, strengthen the professional standards and teacher development pathways to ensure equitable quality across public and private education providers. Our ask for this, Mr. Chair, is a robust TEC will enable the Philippines to develop a competent and equitably distributed teaching workforce capable of delivering quality education for all learners. And lastly, next slide, our fifth ask is on establishing national industry boards and technical panels, which will strengthen industry linkages and skills governance. So our responsive education system and training system depends on strong alignment between government, industry, and academe. Recently, just in September 2025, CHED and TESDA issued a JMC establishing, or Joint Memorandum Circular establishing the Board of Curriculum Standards and Discipline and Sector Skills Councils, and mandating the creation of technical panels and national industry boards for priority sectors identified by EdComm2, particularly in advanced manufacturing, digital technology, healthcare, finance services, tourism, and creative economy. These mechanisms are designed to harmonize higher education and TVET standards and ensure that training and curricula are co-developed with industry to meet the current and emerging workforce needs. Again, this is based from the findings of EdComm2. No? However, for 2026, CHED's 33.1 billion and TESDA's around 20 billion allocations under the NEP support policy, regulatory, and training functions, but neither agency has dedicated budget line to operationalize the newly signed JMC. Ang nakikita po namin dito, Mr. Chair, is baka ang mangyari po, while maganda yung promise ng newly signed JMC na to, baka maging kapareho po siya ng story ng ating PQF. Dahil wala pong budget or walang agency accountable for the PQF at wala pong budget dedicated for it, matagal po siyang natenga. Yes. So our call is for a clear and sufficient budget allocation beginning next year to operationalize the CHED and TESDA Joint Memorandum Circular and to institutionalize sustained industry engagement in education and training. The allocation should strengthen the collaboration between CHED and TESDA and the industry partners through the establishment of the Discipline and Sector Skills Councils, the National Industry Training Boards, and the technical panels in priority sectors. Specifically, funds must be allocated to, as what I've said, institutionalize and support structured industry participation, ensure clear budget ownership and accountability between CHED and TESDA, with one agency designated to manage and implement the JMC, and the allocation should cover for secretariat operations, stakeholder consultations, research and data systems, and the development of Philippine skills frameworks aligned to the Philippine Qualifications Framework, or the PQF. There should be adequate funding for the secretariat of the created Board of Curriculum Standards as well, to operationalize and coordinate the work of the technical panels of the DSSCs and the National Industry Training Boards across these agencies.